Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone has had tea and coffee and everything else that is available. Admiral Hari Kumar, PVSM, AVSM, VSN, ADC, Chief of Naval Staff, ladies and gentlemen. We are privileged to have India's Chief of Naval Staff amongst us today. Thank you very much, Admiral, for agreeing to address uh, all the people from management at this management convention. You head one of India's most admired institutions, the Indian Navy, and you bring an enormous leadership competence to and experience to a critical arm of the Indian Armed Forces. This is amazing for someone who is really not interested in joining the armed forces. I understand you really wanted to be an engineer and go to IIT. Luckily for us, I think some of your relations have convinced you to join the armed forces, and now we have a brilliant Navy chief. So I guess we are very lucky. You're a specialist in gunnery, and you've also commanded many large warships, including the INS Virat and the INS Ranveer. And while Admiral was commanding the INS Ranveer, I think that was the first time that a BrahMos missile was launched from an Indian Navy destroyer. You have provided leadership not only at the naval headquarters, but also on the sea. And you've been an advisor to the government of Seychelles, naval advisor to the government of Seychelles. I think, ladies and gentlemen, we are at a very, we are living in interesting times, as I said. There are many things going on in the world, including the current invasion of Ukraine by Russia. And I think this is also a time of great transition for the Indian Navy. Recently, the INS Vikrant, the first indigenously built aircraft carrier, was launched. And I believe that another one is on the way. We're also investing in a fleet of submarines. And I think that will help the Indian Navy dominate the Indian Ocean like it did earlier in history. One only has to read Sanjeev Sanyal's book, The Ocean of Churn, to understand how, I think over 1,000 years ago, India, the different South Indian kingdoms promoted trade as well as carried Indian culture across to Southeast Asia, Indonesia, as well as Southeast Indochina and that region. And I think about 1,000 years ago, when the balance of power shifted north and the capital moved over here, somewhere around here, that's when Indian kingdoms lost interest in the sea and were more interested in trade and control of land in the northern region. And that was really taken advantage of by the European powers, who then came here to dominate trade as well as conquered India. So I think we're now, as I said, living in interesting times. The Navy is central to Atmanirbhar Bharat with the launch of the aircraft carrier, and that will help Indian industry contribute a lot more to the Indian Armed Forces. I believe that that is going to result in a lot of new technology being developed within India, and also help us become an industrial power, because as we can see, most military technologies finally find civilian uses. And that, I think, is going to be something that will change the total landscape as far as India is concerned. Earlier this morning, we had two speakers, two ministers, Mr. Nitin Gadkari and Mr. Jyotiraditya Scindia, who spoke about how this is India's moment now. Things are changing around the world. Our voice is getting more and more important. And I think it's very important now that the Indian Navy also will be doing its part to ensure that trade as well as defense will be looked after very well. So may I now invite you to address us.
Mr. C.K. Ranganathan, President AIMA, Mr. Sanjay Kirloskar, distinguished guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed an honor and a privilege for me to deliver the keynote address for the plenary session on India's naval revolution and becoming an ocean power as part of the 49th National Management Convention, which is host to such a distinguished audience as all of you present here. At the outset, I would like to thank the All India Management Association for affording me this opportunity to share my thoughts on this topic. The theme of the convention, Advantage India, Thriving in the New World Order, is indeed apt as we celebrate the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav and march into the Amrit Kal. I shall be dividing my talk into three main sections. Firstly, I shall dwell upon India's maritime heritage and the significance of the Indian Ocean region. In the second part, I will touch upon the emerging maritime security challenges and the measures adopted by the Indian Navy to address these. And I shall thereafter conclude by highlighting Indian Navy's role in nation building and contribution to Atmanirbharta while we progress on our journey to becoming an ocean power. So the maritime characteristic of our nation is fundamental to our national identity and is firmly embedded in our philosophy since time immemorial. With water on three sides and the Himalayas to the north, our country lies in the very lap of the Indian Ocean, which incidentally is the only ocean which is named after any country. The seas for India have been the medium for pursuing prosperity, communication, friendship over many centuries. And our ancient Indian history bears evidence of significant maritime trade between India, Western Asia, the Mediterranean region, the Far East, as far back as the 3rd millennium BCE, and the dry dock in Lothal in Gujarat, which dates back to 2500 BC or 2200 BC, is a testimony to the thriving maritime infrastructure, particularly the ports of the time. And incidentally, Indian Ocean is the oldest traveled ocean, dating back over 5,000 years. History has repeatedly reinforced the fact that supremacy at sea is paramount for any maritime power. From the Romans and Greeks in the medieval ages to the rise of European nations in the 16th and 17th centuries, navies have played a major role in the establishment and growth of empires and nations. So India too has had periods of notable maritime strength, particularly during the peak of the Chola dynasty in the 10th and 11th century, wherein they wielded significant influence in areas bordering the Bay of Bengal and Southeast Asia. However, unfortunately, the ensuing period witnessed our maritime heritage suffering a series of setbacks owing to the advent and rise of a purely land-centric outlook, which allowed the British, the French, the Portuguese who arrived by sea to make inroads and rule as colonizers. It's a fact that Akbar, who ruled from Delhi, had seen the sea only once in his life when he visited the Gulf of Khambat. And this downturn in our maritime power sadly heralded a correspondingly low phase for the nation. And in this regard, we must remain cognizant that the freedom we celebrate today was lost partly due to the absence of a credible Indian maritime power. This lesson of history was aptly articulated by Sardar K. Panikkar when he famously said, India never lost her independence till she lost the command of the sea in the first decade of the 16th century. And till the 18th century, India had a vibrant shipbuilding industry in the days of sail and of those wooden ships. And up to that time, it is said that the ship is the most complex machinery ever made by man till then. And coming to the modern era, a country with a coastline extending more than 11,000 kilometers and nearly 1,400 islands is unquestionably a maritime nation. and our international trade is largely dependent upon the seas, and around 68% by value and 95% by volume of our foreign trade is seaborne. Around 86% of our oil needs are imported across the sea, and another 5% is met from offshore assets. So India's exclusive economic zone, which measures nearly 2 million square kilometers, bears a treasure of marine wealth and resources, and all these are vital enablers to drive India's prosperity. So as management experts, I am sure you will agree that managing and leveraging these should remain a national priority. It's said that we hardly exploit our oceans. There's a saying that in India, the fish die of old age. The Indians consume about 3 kgs of fish annually, while the Japanese consume about 40 kgs of fish. So the importance of the seas has been well underscored by our Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi ji, who aptly stated that the Indian Ocean has shaped much of India's history and it now holds the key to our future. Thus, it should be clear that India's growth trajectory in the Amrit Kal is inextricably linked to the oceans and will be shaped by our ability to harness the oceans. However, the Indian Ocean region with its vast resources is of interest to not only India but also a multitude of nations, regional as well as extra-regional. And this region is also host to the world's busiest waterways, carrying 75% of the world's maritime trade and 50% of daily global oil transfers. So the Indian Ocean clearly assumes importance well beyond its immediate shores and the littorals. So transportation by sea remains the most efficient, especially for bulk cargo. So just to put in perspective, with the same amount of energy, we can transport 250 kgs by road, 2,500 kgs by rail, and 25,000 kgs by sea. So that is the type of scales of economy in transportation. Then there is also the 66, 70, 80, 90, 99% rule. It says that 66% of our resources come from in and around the sea, 70% of the world is oceans, 80% of the population live very close to the coastal region, 90% of our trade comes through the seas, and 99% of our internet traffic flows through the undersea cables. And Sardar Panikkar also called the Indian Ocean a landlocked sea, thus giving it a unique character. Enclosed by land on 3 sides, its entry and exit, both from the east and the west, are funneled through various choke points. Thus, this unique nature of the Indian Ocean region offers India a geographical advantage, but it also brings with it a daunting task of managing various challenges and security threats. So let me now share with you my understanding of the security environment. I see our contemporary security scenario shaped by a trinity of 3 I's, namely imperatives at home, influences from outside, and intrusive paradigms. The imperatives at home, they include promoting India's national interests wherever they may lie, preserving a safe and secure environment to catalyze our economic growth and prosperity, and protecting against continued inimical action by adversarial actors, including below the threshold of conflict, while at the same time remaining ready for a full-time or full-scale war. Talking of the influences from outside, they include the reshaping of the global competition driven by great power rivalry and the increasing multipolarity, rebalancing of geostrategic equations as a consequence of the ongoing conflict in Europe, rising potency of various non-state and state-sponsored actors, and redefining of the character of warfare, which, according to Clausewitz, changes like a chameleon, while the nature of war, of being brutal, always remains the same. And also the reiteration of threats posed by climate change through a multitude of natural disasters and the rising sea levels, which pose a threat to many island nations in our region. And the third I is the rise of certain intrusive paradigms, which are all pervasive, all impacting, and all encompassing. So they include niche and disruptive technologies offering a wide array of options across both military as well as civil domains. The cyber domain, which is both an enabler and a vulnerability. And third, the cognitive domain and its growing weaponization using various imaginative tools and techniques as well as targets, all happening at the speed of light. And talking of the security challenges which emanate from the security environment, while the competition is being played out on a daily basis, at times testing our limits, but without escalating into armed action, a war with potential adversaries can never be ruled out. And in this regard, China remains a formidable challenge and has increased its presence not only along our land borders, but also in the maritime domain by leveraging anti-piracy operations to normalize its naval presence in the Indian Ocean region. To our west, Pakistan, despite economic constraints, has continued its military modernization, especially its navy, which is on track to become a 50-platform force by about 2030, 2035. So while these conventional military challenges persist, terrorism remains a major security threat as it continues to evolve in shape, scale, and size. Staying one step ahead of such an invisible enemy who will constantly innovate tactics enabled by niche technologies is a challenge that persists. And apart from these diverse threats that invoke our military role, the challenges imposed by piracy, arms and drug smuggling, illegal immigration, unregulated fishing, all this invoke our constabulary role and thereby expand our responsibilities further. So we all need to understand that the wars of tomorrow will not only include the high seas, but straddle multiple domains. The battlefield will transcend physical boundaries, it will be fought on the sea, under the sea, over the seas, on land, in the air, in the information domain, in space, in the digital world, and in the cognitive domain, which is in our minds. It is amidst this trinity of I's and security challenges that national security, including maritime security, has to be ensured. So considering the nature of these challenges and the importance of the maritime domain as a prime facilitator of our economic well-being, overcoming them would need a comprehensive approach with coordinated involvement of a number of agencies. I'll now speak very briefly about how the Navy intends to deal with these challenges. So talking of the Navy's lines of effort, if I were to define Navy's approach in a simple phrase, it is to remain a combat-ready, credible, cohesive and future-proof force. So by combat-ready, the focus is on ordnance centricity, building up capabilities and capacities to overcome the security challenges through theater-level exercises, high tempo of operations, and a singular aim of deterring, and if deterrence fails, then to win at any cost in any given conflict. So we aim to achieve this through our potent platforms, continuously evolving plans, efficient procedures, and motivated military professional personnel. In the words of Sir John Hackett, military life is about the ordered application of force under an unlimited liability. It is this unlimited liability which sets the military life or the military person quite apart from all other professions. Coming to credibility, this is being pursued through enhanced reach and sustenance, where our footprint has expanded to where our interests lie. We undertake mission-based deployments, which entails combat-ready units deployed across our areas of interest, ensuring a forward posture and being ever ready, reliable and responsive. Or in short, we aim to be the first responder to any challenge, not just for contingencies in our country, but also in the friendly foreign states. So this is also in consonance with our Honorable Prime Minister's vision of SAGAR, the acronym, which stands for Security and Growth for All in the region. He believes that a rising tide lifts all boats, so we cannot develop on our own. We need to take all the friendly nations in our region together. So in pursuance of being a cohesive force, our endeavor is to glue our Navy into a well-knit team. While management produces tangible things extraordinary well, as all of you present here are well aware as management gurus, it provides strong organizational structures and support. We cannot manage people into the commitment necessary to accept the risk of battle or to risk their lives in combat. For that, you require leadership. And leadership is required to convince people to accept such life-changing situations or similar social activities or social enterprises of that nature. So every contact with the adversary has brought out the need for dominant and skillful leadership. So in the Navy, we pay much attention to the development of good, effective and skillful leaders at every level. So also efforts are on to foster true jointness with the Army and the Air Force. In this regard, I must tell you that we have instituted a General Rawat Memorial Award both at our Naval War College as well as for the best women Agniveer, whose induction will happen towards the end of this year. Externally, the endeavor is to forge bonds with like-minded navies to deal with common security challenges at sea as one entity. And in this context, the Indian Navy's initiatives in the form of Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, the Goa Maritime Conclave, the Goa Maritime Seminar, as well as various maritime partnership exercises, they all build trust and interoperability, resulting in reinforcing the maritime security quotient in our region. In terms of future proofing, the key focus area is to leverage niche and disruptive technologies. The Navy has set up a 3-tier organization under the Naval Innovation and Indigenization Organization, NIIO, to help us synchronize our requirements with the industry and academia. The NIIO is currently in consultation with around 120 startups for the induction of niche technology in unmanned and autonomous systems, secure communications, quantum, smart sensors, smart weapons, surveillance, imaging, and so on. This symbolic relationship or symbiotic relationship will help us to leapfrog existing technology curves while concurrently identifying and establishing new areas to pole vault and emerge as leaders in these fields. So in order to do so, the Navy would need to be agile and adaptive to incorporate new technologies and become an aspirational force. So transformational changes are also being progressed with respect to human resources. The Agnipath scheme, induction of women sailors, opening of all branches of the Navy to women officers, etc. So we are focused on attracting and retaining the requisite talent. We are conscious of what Richard D. Haas, the CEO of Levi Strauss, said. The main difference, and I quote, the main difference between corporations of the future and the present day counterpart will not be the products that they make or the equipment they use, but who will be working, why they will be working, how they will work, and what work means to them, unquote. The Indian Navy, as the principal manifestation of India's maritime power, remains committed to preserving, protecting and promoting our maritime interests. However, for India to truly transform into an Indian Ocean power, we need much more. Accordingly, the Navy, in addition to providing maritime security, is equally committed to Rashtra Nirman. And let me elaborate this. The Indian Navy, since inception, has been deeply committed towards Atmanirbharta. Our first indigenous ship was built in 1961. It was a small boat. Navies are meant to be built and not bought. And it is with this foundational belief that the Indian Navy embarked on its quest of self-reliance and indigenization. You'd be happy to know that while the 29 ships commissioned in the last 7 years, they were all constructed in India, 43 out of 45 ships which are under construction. So 43 out of 45 ships which are under construction are also being built at Indian shipyards. Further, 39 ships under contract conclusion will similarly be indigenous, and our aim is the promise we have made to our Prime Minister is to be a Navy which is fully Atmanirbhar by 2047. Further, we have always endeavored to reinvest a large share of our budget back into the Indian economy. 88% of our future contracts on cost basis amounting to investments of nearly 1,75,000 crores are being progressed through Indian enterprises, which means that for every 10 crore rupees spent, 9 crore is invested back into our economy. The major recipient of our capital investment are Indian shipyards and Indian industry. Indigenous shipbuilding projects are also catalysts for employment generation and skill development. To quote an example, the indigenous content in the recently commissioned INS Vikrant or aircraft carrier is close to 76%, which includes the ship's steel hull, which is heavy enough to erect as many as 3 airfield towers. Close to 2,000 shipyard workers and close to 13,000 non-yard personnel have been employed per annum towards construction of this aircraft carrier, thereby creating a substantial blowback effect on the domestic economy. And apart from shipbuilding industry, the Navy is also focused on engaging with the MSMEs and startups towards developing niche technologies or products for the Navy. The Navy is also fully supportive of all other efforts to harness the blue economy. And we are also contributing in over 20 schemes of the Government of India, be it the Smart Cities Mission, Digital India Mission, Nari Shakti, Government E-Marketplace, Swachh Bharat, and so on. So to sum up, the Indian Navy's focus on supporting and promoting Indian shipbuilding and Indian defense industry spurs economic growth and stimulates industrial skilling. And being a Atmanirbhar Navy is the stepping stone towards being a true ocean power. Our ability to share such indigenous capabilities with friendly foreign countries would also have significant strategic outcomes, which in turn would further support our quest. So to conclude, it would not be stating the obvious to say that a strong Navy espouses a stronger nation, as India looks more to the seas for spurring economic growth, building commensurate maritime resources and naval strength are a must to ensure security and drive prosperity. It would and should translate into adequate spending on the Navy with the confidence that it will not be a traditional guns expenditure, but will include a pronounced share of the butter component as well, with the Navy reinvesting a majority of its budgeted capital back into the nation. And the assets and the capability that Navy acquires as a result will continue to protect, preserve and promote our aspirational national interests in our quest to elevate India to her rightful place of being a developed nation by 2047 in consonance with the Panch Pran articulated by our Honorable Prime Minister. So thank you for your time. Jai Hind.